Wastelands was quite an early song that we wrote, wasn't it? It was the first, for me, it was the first song that I thought, okay, yeah, now we're really getting somewhere now. It was kind of like that was the first time that I thought that things were kind of coming together. It felt like we sort of had a body of work that was sort of starting to kind of, you know.
Yes, it was. The actual writing, I think, started. It was only a matter of weeks after we finished the Night Thoughts tour, which wasn't very long. It was a few weeks long, and it might have finished in February 2016. And by March, I think we'd started coming up with ideas around at Neil's house. And yeah, Wastelands was probably the first one that felt like it was really in the bag. You know, it was Neil did a great demo of it as well, which we all listened to death. You know, which is never a good idea before you start recording it properly. But it just seemed to hit the nail on the head for what we wanted to do, with it, you know, the lyrics and the melody and everything and the way it moved. And yeah, it's just it was. I don't feel it evolved massively when we actually came to record it properly, because it was so set in stone when the day it was written, virtually. You know, so it was.
It's one of those tracks you just go in and record, isn't it?
Yeah.
There was no kind of like,
It didn't change.
should we try this? You know, should it go into a reggae verse or something? It was just kind of like, oh, it sounds really good.
Well, that's a good idea.
Shit. Should have done that.
Right, ready for the next record, don't worry. It's all up. It's all up here.
Generally, I started off. The starting point was to write from a child's point of view, and sort of having just moved to the countryside, it's sort of like the sort of rural sort of scrubland kind of feel just sort of seemed to be appropriate. I kind of wanted to. I've always kind of been quite inspired by space, and you know, sort of early Suede stuff is very sort of urban and you know, kind of sort of decadent and urban, I suppose. And with this, I wanted to sort of take it somewhere else, to make it sort of scruffy and sort of almost like talk about the hinterlands and those kind of wastelands, all those sort of spaces that no one really goes to, but everyone, you know, there's something quite sort of romantic. One of my favourite books in terms of tone is Concrete Island by J.G. Ballard, where a man just gets sort of stranded in a kind of weird sort of kind of bit of scrubland between motorways, and it always really resonates with me, that the idea of that, you know. And I quite like that. So that was quite a strong sort of narrative idea for this record. I'm much more able to talk about these things now with sort of, you know, when me and Neil and Richard are writing, talk to them about it. And I think when I was a young man, when I wrote, it was sort of so intensely private. I couldn't really sort of talk about what I was trying to achieve. It was sort of like, and in a funny sort of way, I didn't used to even admit to myself. It was sort of it's almost like this kind of writing was this sort of weird sort of process that I went through that kind of I refused to sort of file and label and stuff like that. And now when we're writing, I think it's really necessary, if we're making albums like this, that, you know, the rest of the band sort of know what we're trying to do. Otherwise it'll just be like a hodgepodge, you know, just be, you know, it needs to have a kind of a focus. And so very sort of early on I talked to Neil and Richard about this idea about sort of setting it through a child's eyes and kind of, you know, set this, and we had this image, didn't we, of the cat walking. Neil's got this fridge magnet, this kind of picture of a cat walking in a snowy landscape, and it was almost like every song had to fit in this weird little sort of monochromatic drawing sort of thing. So yeah, it was quite an early thing. Yeah.
I think it sounds like the kind of record
Sounds
that
like a fridge magnet,
inspired by a fridge magnet. But people will hear it and go, oh,
it's a new genre of
fridge magnet. Yeah.
New genre of music, fridge magnet rock.
But that's a good way of not using too many words to conceptualise it. You know, you write a song, does it sound like this fridge magnet? You know, it's got to be yes or no. There's no in between. So that was how we wrote the album.
Consult the fridge.
There's a big sense of space about this record, and so we went back to kind of our childhoods where we all grew up kind of away from this kind of an urban environment, and it was more like the kind of place that we're talking about in this record. So it's kind of like we thought back to when we were in these kind of things, and that was the kind of thing that was on telly, wasn't it? It was kind of terrifying things that could happen to children. Don't touch this, don't
you go into
there,
the countryside,
don't get wet, you know.
Stranger danger.